As the CEO of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Development Corporation, what is your perspective on how tribes approach economic development and create meaningful, sustainable employment opportunities for tribal members?
I think Chantal touched on it. We create a lot of businesses, like casinos, that focus on customer service oriented type jobs. And that's not the type of job that everybody wants, or it leverages their strengths. So at least for my organization right now, we're focusing on two things internally. We're revamping our company culture, and we're developing career development plans for every employee in the organization. This is going to be a great way for us to leverage the people we have currently working for us. And we are doing that by creating development plans, focusing on emotional intelligence, goal setting, career planning, and with a strengths finder focus. So we assist our employees to not only grow, we're also giving them the ability to move within our organization to leverage their strengths. And so that this means they might start off in one position and move to an entirely different position, depending on what they're comfortable with and where they're succeeding. So I just find it interesting that throughout my education, it seems like our culture doesn't really focus too much on personal development. And so that's kind of the focus I've had right now with everybody in the building, is to really grow and gain some soft skills that they can take with them throughout their life. So at the same time, right now, we're hiring more professional positions. So currently I'm looking for an accountant and an economic planner. I'm hoping that one of these roles will be filled by a Coeur d'Alene Tribal member, but I'm soliciting out to just about anybody to come join our team. So all of this is necessary, though, because we're looking to move into different industries. One of those being energy. I got invited by Tiffany in our natural resources department, because the both of us have been working a little bit on energy and energy efficiency. And so this is still an area that I think we need to really take more strides in. I applaud the Nez Perce Tribe for what they're doing. The model they have is great. But we're also going to focus on a distribution center, hopefully a data center, and maybe fill the needs of the aerospace industry. So that's kind of our short-term plans in terms of development. And then finally, we're in the beginning stages of design and innovation center. This will be a communal space that will provide people the opportunity to come together and talk. We'll also hopefully hold events, family events, speaking events, and then focus on a specific growth industry. And so we're not sure at this point what that industry will be, but never too, it's good to dream big. And so right now, I don't think it would be crazy to think that we might move the movie industry into this area. So for us, it's, Don kind of alluded to it earlier, where the tribes are in the position right now of diversifying. So, and right now we're just trying to leverage our strengths.
Thank you so much, James. Kurt, I saw you unmute yourself. Are you wanting to add anything today?
I don't want to take any time away from the panel members. But if there's just a moment, one of the topics that both James and the other panel members, Chantal and some other folks, have talked about is energy, specifically electrical energy. Darrell highlighted the Warm Springs Tribe's collaboration on the and co-ownership of the Pelton Round Butte hydroelectric project. So energy sovereignty is one of the topics that's being discussed in a lot of tribal governments right now. And here's why. For decades, and I'm not being critical here, this is just a fact, for decades, the local power company, whether it's a for-profit or a co-op, has basically used the reservation economy as a cash cow. And so every month, the tribal government and tribal members would pay their bills, and it's like a giant vacuum cleaner of cash. That cash leaves the reservation. No tribal members would be employed by the utility, even for customer service jobs, let alone the high-skilled jobs like linemen, technicians, foremen, stuff like that. So all around the region, there are a number of tribes that are either currently looking at forming an electrical utility or already have. A couple of examples of successful formation would be the Kalispel tribe up in Northeast Washington, Yakima Power in South Central Washington, and the Cow Creek Band of the Lower Umpqua. All of these tribes have formed their own utility. And what's interesting is that as the tribes have built expertise in the energy industry, the dollars that tribal members and tribal government were sending off the reservation to put money in the pockets of the local utility, whether it's for profit or cooperatively owned, those dollars are now staying on the reservation. So the linemen, the customer service, the technicians, the engineers are getting paid by the tribal utility, and the dollars that they're being paid are staying on the reservation, and they're funding other reservation entrepreneurs, whether it's buying gas or groceries or getting their car fixed or installing wireless access at their homes or whatever it is that they're spending money on. Those dollars are now staying on the reservation and being recirculated to pump up and reinforce a sustainable tribal economy. So energy sovereignty, it sounds like a buzzword, but it's a critical piece of the economic prosperity equation that Don and James have been talking about. So that's all I have to say. Sorry.
Thank you, Kurt. Your perspective is always welcome. You can always chime in. Thank you for sharing that. So I would love to ask if either Darrell or John would like to contribute to this part of the conversation. Anything that either of you want to add before we move on to the next section, which I know you both have stuff for the next section as well, but wanted to give you a moment if you wanted to chime in, Darrell or Don.
Go ahead, Darrell.
Don, you were already off mute before me, so I take that as...
I was ready to go into the next topic, but I just want to give a shout out to Karen Power. Thank you for your work. She worked hard for climate policy and cap and reduce, cap and trade, and which have benefited the Oregon tribes significantly. So we're working forward on new legislation in Oregon, but it deals with energy, and energy sovereignty is really key for tribes. But diversifying from gaming for the past 25, 30 years has been the capital that tribes have built themselves and been able to invest and diversify, as our panelists have been saying. Our tribe invested in the software development company. We partnered with Accenture, which is a multi-billion-dollar international company, and we develop software on our reservation. We have a call center. We have services that we provide remotely for people around the world. So on a rural area, we've been able to do that. We've invested in energy self-sufficiency, 106 megawatt wind project. Now we're looking at solar, and the idea of reducing greenhouse gases. It's a long-term goal of the tribes. They're taking action not only in terms of the policy and work they do nationally and internationally, but also reinvesting in renewables and looking at businesses that look at sustainable development. The triple bottom line: the planet, the people, and the profits. And I think also from a cultural preservation standpoint, part of my talk in the next session is really about what are tribes looking for, and how could you partner with the tribes? What are the opportunities? And I think the bottom line is you need to understand the tribe, do your research, understand who they are and what their values are. Build that personal relationship. And what you'll find is that many tribes are really advancing their work in sustainable development and looking at that triple, even quadruple bottom line.
Thank you, Don. Darrell, did you have a comment to add today?
I think so. And I think maybe stepping back a little and thinking about, we've talked about sustainability, and I think all of these things were already inherent in the way in which we exercised our sovereignty. Kind of going back to the discussion earlier this morning about those fundamental core values that tribes have. I think at the heart of that is sustainability and stewardship. The notion to, when tribal leadership and councils and so forth are sitting around the table, is not just to speak on behalf of themselves, their communities and families, but often representing those resources that can't speak for themselves in those forums. And that is our natural resources, our wildlife resources, and again, that sort of whole look at those whole systems. And, so kind of thinking about that in this transition, gaming has been brought up a number of times, and energy, and, exercising that economic muscle of, our sovereign interests. But, thinking about that over time, and again, referencing sort of the history of transition in our communities, when we think about our reservation communities, we were placed there on these homelands that, were thought as less desirable. And we are, as resilient people, making a living, thriving where we are located. But we were never meant to thrive on reservations. We were meant to assimilate. I mean, we see that through federal Indian policy. And we're sort of turning that now on its head, but it's not as easy for some tribes. And that's why I just want to make sure that you don't paint an entirely, to make sure that we capture some of those tribes that are struggling, because I think James mentioned location. Not every tribe is located in a corridor that's equally or easily accessible to markets or to places. So, diversifying their economic portfolio is very limited. And if you're very rurally located, like we have some tribes, Burns Paiute is one example of those, or you have tribes that just are situated in places where maybe the infrastructure, transportation infrastructure is just not there. So it does come down to those relationships, as Dawn referenced, and getting to know people. And that often begins, most innovative projects I see created in tribal lands come from a relationship, come from a convening or forums like this, where one person says, I have an idea, and another person says, I heard you, and they get together, and that's where these things start to grow. And so I just wanted to kind of mention that. And one last thing is in reference to what Kurt brought up. So I started working in the energy sector about, oh gosh, now I'm dating myself, 13 years ago. And I recall when I first got started, we'd have these convenings with tribes on energy, and it was like 7, no more than 10 tribes would show up to these sessions. And after the Obama administration, there was a mass investment in Indian country, and Indian country is a term of art, but into tribal economies to grow that sector. And today, to see it today and to hear James and Chantel and Dawn talking about the participation, that was no longer just 7 tribes, it's now many tribes, if not all of them, are participating in some way, not passively as consumers of utility services, but now owning their own assets and utilities and owning their own projects. And so I just wanted to, again, to sort of underscore that we're really trying to work on this platform of resiliency with regard to our economies.
Thank you, Darrell. That was great. It's a good segue into our next section, which I want to, at this point, we're already getting some great questions. Definitely check out the chat. There's been a little conversation over there as well. I want to make sure that the attendees know that I welcome your questions in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the chat now. And I would love to put this next question to the panelists. And really, this is like kind of the keystone of this presentation and why a lot of these businesses are here. And these aren't just businesses, these are B Corps, and B Corps are amazing, conscientious businesses who have gone through these very rigorous assessments to become certified. So it's really an amazing group of people on this call today, and I'm hoping these connections become real after this call. But how can non-tribal businesses invest in, support, or contribute to tribal economic development programs in the Pacific Northwest on and off reservations?
So this is a presentation I've made, and I've worked with different non-Indian businesses who want to engage and work with tribes. Really, why develop a partnership? Who are the tribes, and considerations and opportunities that you need to think about? The next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the tribes are sovereign governments. You need to understand that first and foremost. There's 574 tribes in the country. As I mentioned, some have gaming casinos in 28 states, over 27.8 billion in revenue. And it supports tribal government programs and services, including economic development. So some tribes have these resources, some don't. So it's important to understand that there's disparity amongst tribes in terms of gaming. Next slide. These are the reservations across the United States. Of course, in Oregon, there are 9 tribes, but Washington, in particularly the Northwest, there are a number of tribes, 29 in Washington, 109 in California. How many in Idaho? A lot of them. Hey, just kidding, James. Why? Go ahead to the next slide. We got two of my friends from Idaho, Nez Perce and Coeur d'Alene. Why would tribes invest or partner with outside businesses? One is they want to be able to diversify their economic development, establish new business opportunities, create jobs, and build expertise in the new business and industries. They're also looking for alternative to gaming for long-term sources of revenue. You have to realize that tribes rely on that gaming revenue, most of them, for a significant part of their government services. They also want to look at increasing return on investment, but they're also interested more and more in triple bottom line, the planet, people, profit. What's key to that is building that personal trust first and that business relationship second. Next. And this is really what you need to think about. What are the tribe's goals and how do they fit with your business? Your businesses are B Corp, as mentioned, they've done a lot of work in sustainability, thinking of people, planet, and profit. And as Darrell was saying, many of our tribal leaders and our staff still think of that perspective in terms of sustainability, because we need to make these changes now as part of our business, as part of our government, as part of our society. Next slide. And there's kind of what I say 4 levels of diversification that's going on with tribes right now, and it's really expanding to the bottom line, bottom part of this. But non-gaming amenities, many tribes have casinos. They're looking at non-gaming amenities that are adjacent to their gaming facilities or on reservation. Many tourist-related non-gaming businesses, on-reservation businesses that might export products off the res, and off-reservation businesses and joint ventures. And that's the area that more and more you're seeing tribes explore. Next. It's important to understand some key factors when you're considering partnering with a tribe. First and foremost, you must understand and study the history, culture, government, and business experience of the tribe. You must understand that because that's one of the first steps of developing that personal and professional relationship. The stability of the council and how they separate politics and business is important. The structure of the business entity that you're going to engage with. Oftentimes it's a corporation that the tribe may establish under state law or tribal law. Is there sufficient investment capital? You have to understand that tribes are sovereign, and oftentimes they have to have a limited waiver of sovereign immunity to conduct business with partners off the reservation. And last, what they call a uniform commercial code, which means businesses can get a fair deal through tribal courts or state courts in particular, but tribal courts where uniform commercial codes are in place. Next slide. This is some work I've done with some of my partners in real estate investment with tribes. This is Dee Pigsley from Siletz and a guy named Jordan Schnitzer from Portland. Next slide. More meetings with Kalispel tribe. Again, the tribes have very established and experienced business people like James and Chantel and others that are doing a lot of diversification on their reservations now. Next slide. But there's some organizations that are out there that you can connect with. The Oregon Native American Chamber of Commerce, called ONAC. There are a community of professionals, advisors, organizations. James Parker is the director there. He works with us at AT&I. Here's our website. The Oregon Native American Business and Entrepreneur Network. They work coast to coast. They originally started here in Oregon, but work with individual tribal citizens who have their own businesses. Next slide. And on the regional and national level, the affiliate tribe of the Northwest Indians has its Economic Development Corporation. They work with the 57 member tribes throughout the Northwest. There's also the National Center for American Indian Enterprises. And every year they have what's called Res Summit And in 2021, they focused on agriculture, economic development, finance, natural resource procurement, and workforce development. I know that many folks are involved in that. So I just want to leave this information for you. I have to go on to a meeting with Earl Blumenauer on climate with a roundtable, but I appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel and appreciate the panelists, Darrell, James, and Chantel for your expertise, as well as Kurt and Heather for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don, for joining us. Good luck with your meeting and take care. We'll see you again soon. So with that, I actually would love to ask James to join and talk about this particular question of how non-tribal businesses can contribute to tribal economic development. And maybe if you have anything that you could say particularly, or any of you, about even smaller businesses. A lot of B Corps are small to medium-sized businesses, and I know that they're eager to support and contribute and invest in their own way. So maybe there's something you could say to that for me, James.
Well, I think just like with any business, it's really important to try and find what the value proposition is. I think that a lot of people within this country don't understand that tribes are in a position to assist, and we do have a value proposition to provide. So, of course, again, it comes back to location, right? So the Coeur d'Alene tribe, we're a half an hour from Coeur d'Alene. We're 40 minutes from Spokane. So we're pretty close to some major metropolitan areas. Not to mention, we're pretty close to, again, 30 minutes from the I-90. So we're pretty close to an interstate. But for us, the value proposition would be, we don't pay real personal property tax. We are a mission-driven organization. And so when we talk about partnering, you're partnering with an organization that, has a long-term vision and goal in mind. And so if you're looking for partners with a sustainable mission, I think that again is probably a value proposition. But I think it's just getting the word out and letting people know that we're out here. The thing is, for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and probably maybe a lot of tribes that are close to metropolitan areas, what we're seeing in our region is the growth is gonna come onto the reservation here pretty quickly. Everything north and east is filling up, and so again, it kind of goes back to location, but I think there are opportunities. I think it's more just about getting the word out. A lot of things that we do as a people are very social oriented. We're about building communities, taking care of our land and our resources. And, those are missions that a lot of people can build off of. So I think there are opportunities out there. It's just starting the conversation. So that's why what we're doing today is really important.
Darrell, did you have something to add to this part of the conversation?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was fighting with my mute button. I do. Don mentioned a couple of organizations. Of course, you did during my intro, which is I'm a board member with the Oregon Native American Chamber of Commerce, and any business actually can join the Native American Chamber of Commerce. But it is definitely a resource for, again, and I'm also a business owner myself. And I think for a lot of us that are Native entrepreneurs and members of organizations like ONAC, is that it creates this venue and forum for us as business owners to learn from each, and it's a diverse portfolio of sectors that individual tribal entrepreneurs are engaged in. And I think for folks that are participating in this, is we've kind of been talking about sort of tribal economies in sort of two sectors. One is the tribes and tribes enterprises that they have that are owned assets by the tribe and administered, and the employment base comes from the tribe. But then there's also this growing sector of tribal entrepreneurs, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned or Don may have mentioned it, but 80% of each dollar goes off reservation, and we're really trying to add to that sort of cycling our resources internally into the reservation. So having more and more small businesses, and we're starting to see that. So organizations like ONAC and ONABN are kind of there. ONABN runs, it's not Oregon anymore. It's called Our Native American, yada, yada, yada. But they have what's called the Indianpreneurship program. So it's really kind of a help hold folks' hand as they're starting to engage in being their own business. So you've got those two sectors, as the individual or the entrepreneurs, and then the tribe's enterprises. And so those resources are there. And so one of the things that we do at ONAC is sort of, look at for goodwill investment is partnering to help people contribute to ONAC gathering and the tribal student scholarships that are available to students. I think we have 5 students getting awards this year. And essentially those are scholarships, but a lot of folks, that want to contribute there. The other part and sector of investment is finding tribal partners, whether that's looking at a project and engaging a tribe. One example at Warm Springs is GeoVisions, which is part of our tribe's natural resources department that does a lot of the cultural and resource management and archaeology and so forth. But they've started a business that started as an 8A project, and now here we go. So that's finding those partners. It could also be as simple as finding, if you're having a convening, say we go back to in-person convenings, looking at Native American contractors. That could be a tribe, that could be a firm, that could be right down to, if you're having a meal, hire Native American caterers. They're out there. And that's where some of these places and resources are. I guess if we're getting kind of back to that sort of more granular level of how to engage and things and ideas. So.
Thank you, Darrell. Those are all really great ideas. I have been putting some of those resources in the chat as well, if you want to copy and paste those, and I will send out some of these resources after the call as well. And thank you for addressing entrepreneurship. We had a question from the first session about that, so I appreciate you bringing that those points also. And we only have a few minutes left, and I just want to be sure that the attendees, if you have any questions for any of the panelists or for the panel in general, please feel free to unmute yourself and say hi and ask your question. We'd let the last few minutes to see if anybody has any specific questions that you'd like to have answered today. I'm skimming to see if anybody's unmuting themselves. If no one has a specific question, I do have a question that was chatted earlier. And again, we just have maybe a minute and a half to answer this, but there was a question in the chat about what's the role access to childcare plays in economic development for tribes and the professional success of tribal members. I think, James, you had made a comment about that to respond to it. Can you share that with the group?
Yes. So when my kids were younger, we were looking for daycare. And I happened across an app in Seattle where mothers would help find other mothers, and they would, have a play date and just kind of see that things were kind of aligned in terms of how they raise their kids and how they handle daycare in a sense, right? And then what you would do is you would just swap days. And so hypothetically, and again, you need a larger pool of people in order to try to make this work. But, if you found 2 other mothers who had a child, then you could swap days with each other, which means you could work still, and then you wouldn't even pay for daycare. So one thing that we're looking at is we just built a core center in Worley, Idaho. And one idea I have is if we can build an apartment complex with shared daycare co-op rooms on the bottom floor. So these rooms are all built the same. They're child safe. They have toys. They have cameras, so that way everything's filmed. And it's a space where you come in where it's clean. You watch the kids in that one room, and then at the end, you clean up the room, and the space is exactly the way you found it. And I think that would be an opportunity for us to try and solve the issue that is daycare, because it's tremendous cost, and it's really cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And so it's just one idea I have, but whether or not it can take off, I understand. As a parent, you're very protective of your kids, and so to find people who you feel safe and comfortable with can be a tremendous challenge. So it's just an idea.
Thank you, James. And I do want to say at this point, technically the session ends at 12:10, but I'm happy to stay on. And if the panelists want to stay on until 12:15 for any questions or discussion, we are happy to stay on until 12:15. And again, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you do have a question. I did see a question in the chat earlier that I'm happy to. From Hattie. Hi, Hattie, from 3 Degrees. She asked, where can I find more information about tribal utilities and investments in renewable energy development? So Hattie's from 3 Degrees, which is a lot of you may know, is they work in energy, renewable energy. So to the panelists, is there anyone that can speak to where she might be able to find more information about tribal utilities and investments in renewable energy?
Well, I think one local resource is here, is which Kurt just came from, which is Bonneville Power Administration tends to keep track of that, because a lot of tribal utilities are BPA customers because they are public utilities. Those that are partnered with investor owned can have to dig for that and look at probably Public Utilities Commission. But the best resource that I tend to go to is the US Department of Energy's Tribal Energy Program. And I think they're having, and the best place to learn about it is at their program review, which I think is taking place in November. I could be wrong, but that's, yeah, the US Department of Energy Tribal Program and Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs is the other place that I tend to look for information about the latest that's going on in Indian country.
Darrell, can you say that last one more time? Office of
Indian Energy Policy and Programs.
Policy. Okay, I'm trying to capture that in the chat here. So pardon my typos. I'll also make just a tiny plug for my organization. We are related to Bonneville Power Administration through some grants that we get with them, but we are our own independent nonprofit, and we do have a renewable energy program called Sunward, and that program works with low, medium income, underserved communities and tribal communities on building renewable energy resilience. And we do have a tribal renewable energy fund. So feel free to contact me if you want more information about that in particular. And I'll step back. That's all I'll say about that, but feel free to contact me if you have more questions about those. Any other questions? We've got about 60 seconds left.
Hey, Heather, this is Kurt.
Yes.
Another regional resource to learn about tribal utilities and tribal energy development is the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Energy Committee. And that organization meets either virtually or in person 3 times a year.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kurt. I staff that committee, by the way.
I know.
So thank you.
But Darrell, it goes to that point that you made earlier, that today there are not just a handful of tribes talking about energy sovereignty. It's almost every tribe that in one way or another has aspects of their strategic plan that are focused on energy development.
Okay, well, I think we got right to our time, and I just want to send out another huge gratitude to all of our amazing panelists. I'm happy to follow up with anybody. The next question is how to connect, and without throwing all of our panelists' information out there without asking them first, feel free to connect with me if you would like to connect directly with any of the panelists, and I can facilitate introductions and connections there. And my email and connection information should be available through my profile through the BLD conference platform. And I'll also just throw it in the chat for anybody who's still here and would like to connect with any of the panelists or Kurt as well, or myself. So there's my email. Thank you again to everybody for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Kurt for your contribution. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the sessions at the conference. Have a wonderful day.